I was born in Greenville, North Carolina, and spent the first couple of years of my life there. It was a small tobacco town in North Carolina. My dad was practicing dentistry, and he had graduated from Howard University Dental School, and so his home was in North Carolina. And so his best friend was a doctor there, and he decided it would be a good place for them to practice. And it was a small town, and it was good for him in the beginning of his career. But my mother didn't like it. She's from Washington, D.C., and so we this was too country for her. She said, I don't like this. So they went to Raleigh for a short time, and that was better. But when we got time for me to go to school, which was like a couple of years later, she said, no, we have to get a better school. And so she got him to move us back to Washington, D.C., and where she was born, and where he had gone to school. And so that's where I grew up. And that was so the first, I guess, 4 years almost 5 years of my life were down in North Carolina, and then the rest of the time was in Washington, D.C. My Uncle Bob really gave me my first jazz records. He gave me a record by Fats Waller, and I said, well, that's nice. And he said, yeah, you like that? Well, check this out. And he gave me one of Art Tatum. And so I got off his back quick. I said, yeah, but got any more like that one? and so he really started me to listening very specifically to pianists, and he was aware of many of them came to Washington D.C. Because they played there at the Howard Theater, and Earl Hines, and just wonderful pianists some of whom were not well known today, but in those days they were playing dances and playing for social events and stuff like that, and they were all around. I mean, I could hear them all the time. It was great. I went to Dunbar High School, which was one of the best high schools in Washington, D.C. It's a very good school. In those days, segregation was what was going on in the nation's capital. So some of my music teachers, we had 5 teachers with doctorates in a high school. And they shouldn't have been there. They should have been teaching at Harvard or some great school, because these were wonderful, really wonderfully trained and people who really were wonderful musicians. One of my music teachers there started the Association of Negro Musicians, and he's a wonderful arranger, a fine pianist, and he was typical to the people that were all around me at Howard University and the churches. My grandfather's had a Baptist church in D.C., and most of my family went there. And so I heard a lot of music, European classical music, jazz, popular music, everything you can think of, blues, all kinds of music was all there in this. It was all in this one black neighborhood in Washington, D.C. I mean, anything that you wanted to hear was European classical music. Some of the opera singers, and they all came to. We couldn't get into the concert halls, like Constitution Hall, but we didn't need to, because those same people that should have been in those halls were playing in our churches and in the schools. So we got to hear the music anyway. And really, the wonderful thing for me was I got to hear the music that was European classical music and really considered the top echelon of music that was going on in those days. And I got to hear it from people who looked like me. And that was a big deal for me. one of the things about living in D.C., some of the people I went to school with, one of my best friends is the wonderful tenor player Frank West. And Frank is, we went to high school. I was playing saxophone in school because I wanted to play in the band. And they had one of these kids that was, who later became a wonderful classical composer and pianist. So there was no way I was going to get the piano chair. I mean, this guy was already, he was like a year younger than I was, and he was all over the place, And so I said, well, cool, I want to be in the orchestra, so I began to play the saxophone. But Frank West came about a year after we, I think in it was my first year in high school, and he was playing. He was playing classical. He was a classically trained player, but he was playing great jazz. And when we were kids, I said, "Man, wait a minute. I can't play. I want to do that again." So I picked up, tried to pick up, do something with the piano, with the sax, but he was doing so much with sax. I said, I better go back to the piano and see if I can do it with jazz. Something that we were doing with the orchestra. And luckily, we had a lot of things that we did. We're doing lunch hours and after school and stuff. And he would come over to my house sometimes. We'd listen to records all the time. And I developed, even when I was a kid, I developed a great record collection because my dad, his office, he was a dentist, and his office was about I guess 1 block from the Howard Theater, and so I'd get to hear all of these guys. And I'd hang around backstage and see some of the guys that just to see them because I didn't, I had been to see the show, and I just wanted to get a close look at that guy and see him walk down the street, something like that. And they were all around, in the neighborhood, so I got to say a little more than hello to some of them, and that was very exciting for me. And so I began to collect a lot of records. And so when Frank would come over to the house, man, I said, "Hey, man, I got this new Chick Webb record. I got something by Jimmy Lunsford. I got, and we'd be listening to records and trying to figure who was doing what. And he was such a tremendous musician. And we just had a lot of fun just trying to take stuff apart and put it back together again. So that was very exciting to me as a kid because we weren't professionals, but we were, doing the kinds of things that was going to be important to both of us as we developed into professional musicians.